Most people think buying an investment property is simple. Save a deposit, get a loan, collect rent. But what they don't realize is the purchase price is just the beginning.
Stamp duty, insurance, maintenance, management fees, the spending adds up quick. And for most investors, they underestimate them by thousands and thousands of dollars per year. In this episode, we're going to break down the true cost of buying property in Australia so that you don't become the investor who gets in and can't stay in. Welcome back to another episode of the Finance Bible podcast. Zeke here.
And your co-host Oscar. But before we get into it, please note that nothing in this podcast should ever be considered as personal financial advice.
Although, if financial advice is what you are seeking, let us know. We can get you in touch with the correct team.
But for now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Let's get into it.
Welcome back to another episode of the Finance Bible podcast.
Here we are.
We're in person once again. We've just had a bit of a week-long trip interstate to a destination where a few of our clients have been purchasing new properties. So we've just come back. We're in Sydney right now, and it is, it's been a great week, but it's good to be back doing a podcast.
It is. It's always a lovely time to be able to sit down and just chat through our thoughts.
Yeah, exactly right. Now, speaking about thoughts, we spoke about it in the trailer there. When people buy property, they think purely it's just the deposit, save the deposit, and get a loan. But that's not it, is it? There's more to the equation.
There certainly is. And that's where you need to sit down and actually calculate it, run through a tool, meet with a professional, figure out what actually happens. Because realistically, it can be a trap if you're not educated and you don't know what to expect.
Big trap. And we found that with the 5% deposit scheme.
We did. So most people think, cool, deposit, loan, done. But in reality, it's not just the entry fee. You've got other fees associated with actually getting in, and then you got holding costs as well. So it creates a bit of cash flow stress. People have to sell, exit the market, and it turns into a bit of chaos.
Yeah, and then if you've got a stress there, that stress is just literally going to compound in every other avenue of your life. We spoke about it in the car this morning.
We did.
A bit off topic, but how the number one issue in marriages is finances. Number one reason for divorces. So if you can understand the money side of things and not just blindly buy a house without actually anticipating what's going to come down the track, well, it's definitely something you need to do because you might shoot yourself in the foot.
Yeah, stamp duty, for example, when you're entering the market, big cost no one takes into account. If you're buying land on its own and then building on it, you can save thousands of dollars on it. Like realistically, a new construction, if you buy land for say $300K as opposed to buying a total existing property for $800K, your stamp duty is going to be more than double on the existing property than the land itself. So, you could be talking additional 10, 15 grand just in stamp duty up front as on top of the deposit.
Yeah, so that's big. And if you can't afford that, well, that's why you have to kind of just hurry up and slow down. It's a good little saying, but pull yourself back and look at the bigger picture. What can you afford? And we're not saying go buy something which is a house and land package because there's a lot of them out there which is pretty poor,
terrible.
But speak to professionals if you don't really know what's going on. But stamp duty would be the biggest upfront cost that you would have to be. So that could be 20 to 60 grand depending on the state. Secondly, you've got the legal and conveyancing fees. So when you actually purchase a property, you need a legal team to help you with first reviewing all the contracts, making sure you're not getting yourself into a bit of a shitbox and something that's going to come back and bite you in the bum. So that will also help you with the settlement process and making sure that you can actually afford and legally get it done on your behalf. And they can really range in terms of prices, but we're talking at least 15 to 3 grand for a good conveyancer.
1,500 to 3 grand.
Yes.
But yeah, no, a conveyancer can literally make or break deals. Like even little things like helping negotiate finance clause or building and pest clause, they normally pay their money 10 times over and ensure that you're actually structurally secure when you're doing the purchase. And that actually brings me on to my next one, which is going to be building and pest inspection.
Which I actually think is probably the most important actual clause in a contract.
Completely agree. So realistically, when you're purchasing an existing established property, building and pest inspection, you're going to be at least $400, maybe $1,200, pending where and the quality and severity, so on. But realistically, that can save you literally hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, and all our clients who buy an existing property, no matter what, we are always putting a building and pest inspection as a clause in the contract. So, generally we do it for 14 days. So once they've signed the contract, we have 2 weeks to get that inspection done. And then we got the same time to review it and then relay it back to our conveyancer who will speak on the client's behalf to the other side. So we've had clients in the past who have negotiated $10,000, $15,000 off the purchase price to assist with some of the actual areas that were noted in the building pest inspection, like fix a balcony or just simple things like patch up a wall or something like that. So they're really, really important.
It's such a range too. Like generally speaking, it's going to be maybe a couple of grand off, or it's going to be fine and you don't have to do anything. But there's extreme scenarios where it can save you the whole purchase. You can pull out of it, there's termite damage or...
Well, for my own, I had termite damage. I think we were in contract for 510,000, ended up grabbing it for 460 grand because we negotiated that much down. And then, that's now come back and it's really helped us out in terms of instant equity uplift.
Well, yeah, your repairs were sub 20K.
Yeah.
You got 50K off the purchase price.
Yeah, 30 grand.
So you made 30
bang.
grand instantly and got an improved product where the 20K went into actual renovations and improvements.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a win-win. Just for what, 700, your building and pest would be $700, give or take?
Yeah,
so,
if even. So it's that, like you said earlier, can save you thousands of dollars. And then as well, we had another client, for example, whose property was actually quite damaged. And basically, long story short, we had to delay settlement a little bit. And then they got all new appliances from the current vendor's insurance. And basically, all these new products, the house is in better shape and they've made more money anyway without doing anything.
And the delayed settlement saved
so
months
there's just
of interest on the loan, and the rent then went up because the appliances improved.
Yeah, so they got in the property. When it actually handed over to them, they've already made, 20 grand, just like that.
Another great example, a property we did in the northeast had a damaged roof. We got a brand new roof put on there, 18 grand the roof cost. Colorbond roof from tile to Colorbond, big improvement, brand new roof on a 40-year-old property, win-win.
Mm-hmm.
So there's many things
Again,
you can do.
$700 building pest inspection.
Yeah. The next one along is going to be your loan costs. So up front with a loan, there's sometimes application fees, evaluation fees, package fees, that kind of thing. You're talking between $500 to about 2.5 grand. If it's in a self-managed fund, could be more. But realistically, application fees can add up pretty quick. They can normally get added onto the loan, but then you're playing with your LVR percentage or your loan value ratio.
And then talking about the LVR, if you do borrow more than 80%, you generally have to pay LMI, which is lender's mortgage insurance. So it's basically just insurance to protect the lender that you don't default. So generally speaking, this can range depending on your own circumstances. But for this, we'll just say it's roughly 10 to 40 grand plus, again, depending on your circumstances. But that's often very misunderstood. So your broker will speak to you about this and kind of structure it the best way for your own cash flow and stress test your own lending scenarios with an increased interest rate as well. But LMI sometimes does make sense for some clients. Like I personally, with my first one, I paid LMI because I borrowed 90%. And I thought, look, well, the cost of the capital growth on the property is going to outweigh the cost of the LMI. So for me, it's worth getting in the property with 90%.
Yeah, generally you'd make back your LMI within 12 months. You made it back before you signed the contract with the negotiator.
Exactly right. So in some circumstances, it's, in our view, it's not an issue, but obviously everyone's different, but it's just something to take into account if you think you need to borrow more than 80% if your deposit's not too high.
Exactly. And then that's just a few of the upfront costs. If you move on to ongoing cost, for example, between like property management, rates, strata, insurance, water supply, all of that kind of thing, you end up with like ample costs as well. And not many people actually run like calculations on what it's going to cost.
No.
They'll go, I might spend $1,000 a year on maintenance and insurance might cost me $1,000 a year. Surprise and shock to the world, insurance is normally a lot more than that.
Mm-hmm. Especially if you're up in Queensland.
Yeah, up in Queensland, it can range from, $2K to $15K and or not have flood insurance. So you really need to be aware of that and explore it properly. But your property management's going to be, between 7 and 10% of the rent collected per week. Insurance, between 2 and 5 grand per year generally. Rates, a couple grand a year. Maintenance, a couple grand
Depending
a
on
year.
the age of the property as well. Older properties will generally have a higher maintenance level.
Water supply / connection, nearly $500 per year maybe.
And then you've got body corporate if it's in a unit apartment or just a general estate which has it, which can range from 2 to 10 grand plus.
Yeah, but realistically with that, generally speaking, again, most stratas or body corporate will contain building insurance as well. So then you can take away the building insurance aspect and it doesn't.
So it kind of evens out.
But there's so many little things that you just need to take into account and make sure you calculate correctly or speak to a professional about it, and they can help you do the calculations.
Yeah. So the funny thing is, most investors underestimate expenses by roughly, I think it was 20 to 40%, which is a massive number to underestimate. So before you dive into your next property or your first investment property, you have to get all these numbers, rough estimate, figure out what can you actually afford. Like, we've given you numbers there for the ongoing costs. And for yourself, if you were to do it, I would run numbers on the high end to be ultra conservative. If you can afford it on the very high end of the range, then you should be fine. But if you're going to just jump into an investment property and not think about all those other ongoing costs, well, then you're, like I said earlier, you are seriously just shooting yourself in the foot and probably going to delay your investment portfolio by 5-10 years, because it's going to set you back.
Yeah, realistically, you want to, with your rent, you want to assume you're on the lower end of the appraisal. So if you've got an appraisal from 700 to 750 per week, run it at 700, assume worst case scenario, add in 2 weeks of vacancy beforehand as well. Take into account all the expenses that we've mentioned, estimate them the best you can, but then probably add 5% just to be safe. But then realistically, it comes down to a pretty simple thing. Bad investors are going to buy emotionally. They're not going to run the cash flow. They're not going to run the cost calculations. Good investors are going to buy with a buffer. They're going to understand all the costs. They're going to hold it long term and rely on things like capital growth, increased rent over time, and ultimately tax benefits as well, which is a whole other calculation to go into. We won't go into that today because we don't want to provide tax advice on the podcast. However, there's many tax deductions that can be made.
But when you really summarize it all and have the zoom out approach, property itself and investing in property, it's simple, not easy. If you don't understand costs, it's basically like you're just gambling on sports bet, because figuring out property and trying to build wealth in property, it's a numbers game. You have to know exactly where all the numbers are going, and at the end of the day, how much money is coming into your pocket or out of your pocket, because that is literally can make or break your own cash flow and make or break your own investment portfolio.
On average, as a property investor, you're probably going to win more than you're going to lose. If you look at the last
done correctly.
Well, yeah, if you look at the last 20 years or 25 years, you're talking roughly an 8% growth per year for property within Australia. So it's more than the share market. Technically speaking, it's a win-win. However, there's bad ones, there's good ones, and that is the average. So you want to be on the higher end of that, really taking the gains.
Yeah.
But it's a simple breakdown. Do your math, run the numbers, talk to a professional, and enjoy your investment journey.
And before we go, you see a lot of articles out there of next hotspots, buy in this area if you want to make money. My advice would be not to listen to those articles, because it's free advice. You need to not jump on the hype trains with all these news platforms saying this is where you're going to make the money. You need to slow down, speak to professionals who actually do this day in, day out, because if you do it by yourself and you're just jumping on articles, a lot of people lose money on that, and that's how you really delay your own financial situation. So I'll leave it there, because I see so many things on Facebook pop up and hotspots in 2026, and this is where you want to make money, which I just look at it and I cringe, because they're really not helping anyone. They're just making them buy blindly.
And if you are seeking guidance, check the reviews, source check it, double check everything, because we've also seen a lot of people get burnt doing the wrong thing and need to exit properties that they should not have been in the first place. But it's a complicated world. Do your research, reach out to professionals, and enjoy it.
Enjoy. And we'll speak to you next week.
Ciao.
Ciao.
Well, that is the end of the episode. We hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, you know exactly what to do.
Hit that follow button, like button, subscribe, share it to your friends, families, or even a co-worker.
If you're really feeling generous, you could send it off to an ex. But catch you next time. Hope you enjoyed it. Dale.
Ciao.